I mean, he just keeps doing interviews, so we got to talk about it, man. We've tried to move on from all the Lincoln Riley stuff, but listen, he wasn't a big fan of talking to the media when he was OU's coach, but I guess things have changed because he keeps doing interviews. Ted talked to Dennis Dodd from CBS, talked to Chris Lowe from ESPN. He's sticking with the story that the USC thing all came together Sunday morning after that Bedlam loss. Okay, man, whatever. Sure. Sure. But fine. But there were a few things in these interviews that he said that were interesting. First, he said, quote, "I wasn't running from the SEC. I was running to USC." And that's certainly one way of putting it. But I really don't think it's a coincidence he's doing all these interviews and getting this message out there. Clearly, and we've talked about USC having a Dan Lanning Oregon problem on its hands. I'm guessing with what Oregon's doing, with how they've kind of labeled themselves the SEC school on the West Coast, right? I'm guessing that a lot of recruits have been hearing this message from those Oregon coaches, and Lincoln Riley, I mean, he's trying to do his best to get out there and address and say, no, I was going to USC. I'm not scared of the SEC, all that. But clearly he's out here saying this stuff for a reason, because in my experience, he was not a guy that liked to do a lot of interviews. And now he's doing a ton of them, trying to get this message out there.
Yeah, well, and he didn't like to do a whole lot of interviews before, and my guess is because everything was always positive, right? Everything you ever heard around Lincoln Riley, he was pretty much immune to criticism for a long time. And now going out to USC's opened him up to some criticism, obviously from OU fans, but general college football fans. The consensus is, whether it's true or not, is that, yes, he was scared of going to the SEC because he made the move post the OU to the SEC announcement, which, he wasn't fired. He wasn't pushed out. He bailed. So it does make it look like that. And now that there's some of that narrative out there, for the first time, he's had to go into some damage control, and he's done more interviews, more national stuff. He's trying to be the face of that program out there. And you're exactly right. What we saw Tosh Lapoe right out of the gate, whenever they took that job, talking about, I remember Lincoln. We destroyed him in the semifinal when he was at Alabama, 28-0 in the first half. He mentioned that right out of the gate. So
it was actually 28-0 in the first quarter.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But every single recruit that is being recruited by both USC and Oregon is going to hear the same type of stuff. There's no doubt.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see it keep coming up. But that quote really wasn't the one that got OU fans very fired up. This was the one that did the trick. I've walked into 4 playoffs, and I've never had better than maybe the third best roster. Every other year we were 4-4. We had really good rosters, but they weren't the same. I can't imagine there could be a setting that we could build a better roster than we can here. He's clearly talking about his ability to build a roster there out in LA at USC. Okay, I understand why this made OU fans so mad, right? Because it looks like he's making excuses. Right? That's how it feels. Everyone wants to point to that Georgia game and the lead they had at halftime in that game. And I understand that. But he's not necessarily wrong. And I know that's – and it took me a while to come to grips with that. I was like, oh, man, because you and I are the same way, Ted. Like, we were molded by Bob Stoops. And anytime we came up short as a team, whether it was right or wrong, Bob always took the blame. I got to coach better. We got to play better, and it's my job to get them to play better. Like, that's, I got to do a better job. It's on me. I'm the leader of the program. Like, that is what we heard over and over and over time and time again if we came up short. And I don't love, and this just isn't a Lincoln Riley thing. I don't love when head coaches say, well, my players weren't as good. It just doesn't sit well, even though he may not be wrong, right? When you go back and you look at if you just stack up all the rosters, like everyone brings up that Rose Bowl game, right? Obo was the best player on that defense. And he was a really solid college player.
Mm-hmm.
But Emmanuel Beal was the leading tackler on that defense. So it's not like there was a bunch of elite defensive talent. And now there were some guys that were high draft picks, but they were young on that team, like Kenneth Murray. But I just don't think it sits well with OU fans because it sounds like a bunch of excuse making.
Well, it is excuse making. And
I agree.
And this is one of the things that, I've talked about with Lincoln, and we talked about whenever, his departure came around, there was a lot of conversation about him. I can only think of one game, that he won whenever he didn't have the best roster, and that was at Ohio State. That's what everyone else in college football deals with for the most part, right? I mean, there's a handful of teams that have the best rosters. Like, you've got to, like we were just talking about Rocky Kalmus and that 2000 national championship team. They beat a lot of teams that they did not have a better roster than, right? Now, part of it is turning those players. It doesn't always have to be draft picks. You can have a ton of really, really good college players that aren't necessarily high draft picks, but they are prepared, they're detailed, they're tough, they're in shape, they're ready for the moment, and you go out and win games. Like, I don't know that Clemson won 2 national championships, and I don't know that they didn't have the best roster in the country, I don't think.
No. They had really, really good rosters.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. But the reason I saw this and it made me a little upset is one, the wound is still pretty fresh. Let's just be real about this whole situation. But our biggest complaint, at least, our 2 biggest complaints that we had when Lincoln Riley was the head coach was a lack of development and at times a lack of toughness. Right? And that does developing players, does that have a lot to do with talent? Yeah, somewhat. Right? But that was the part that bothered me. And like, you can't say, oh, I didn't have the best roster without also acknowledging the shortcomings when it came to developing the talent that you had.
Right.
That was the big issue. It wasn't that you didn't have a bunch of highly recruited guys. They did. You just didn't turn them into 5-star players with the physical development and instilling the toughness and the discipline. Like, were there some guys that happened with? Absolutely. There's no doubt. I'm not going to make it sound like it didn't happen with a single guy when Lincoln Riley was the head coach. That's not true. But there wasn't enough of it. There wasn't taking a guy that had some raw tools and turning him into an absolute monster. Like, there was not enough of that during his tenure as head coach. And you can't talk about the roster being the 3rd or 4th most talented when you're in the playoff without acknowledging, yeah, we probably didn't develop players the way that we should have. Or at least that's what you and I were always complaining about, at least.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't think there's any doubt. And, I don't know. I'd say the 2017 year,
that offense,
3rd best roster. I don't know. Pretty much every guy on that offense is a all-pro or a Pro Bowl guy now. I mean, you've got how many starters? You had the Heisman Trophy winner. You had CD, D.D. Westbrook, Hollywood Brown, Rodney Anderson. I know he hadn't had the NFL career. Mark Andrews. It's crazy, man. That offense was crazy.
Entire O-line.
Entire O-line. Yep.
I understand where he's coming from, but it's just maybe this is the bottom line for it. He didn't need to say that.
Right.
He didn't need to say that. Like he's the head coach at USC now. So when he says things like, I don't think anywhere else is positioned like USC to build an elite roster, that's great. But you don't have to disparage your OU teams by when you're trying to build up USC by saying, oh, I failed in the playoff because, my players weren't that good at OU.
Right.
You don't need to do that. And it's just another thing, just like they're running for the SEC thing, right? It's just another thing that Oregon coaches are going to use against him. Like, I
blame it on his guys.
He makes a lot of excuses, kind of throws his guys under the bus. You see what he said about his OU players? Huh? It's just something that's going to be used against him. It's something he didn't need to say. There were nothing good came out of saying that.
Nope.
It doesn't reflect well on him. It doesn't make players that he coached at OU feel good. It clearly makes the OU fan base even more upset with him. USC fans, like, are they saying it? Yeah. His rosters weren't that good. That's why he lost in the playoff. Like, is that now a talking point for them? Maybe it is. I don't know. But I just saw that. I saw the backlash from OU fans, and it just didn't need to be said. Nothing positive came out of it for him at all. Or maybe I'm missing something. I don't know.
No, I mean, just from the USC folks, that's all you're going to hear. But, frankly, if they wanted it, like if this is really an answer to the way Oregon is recruiting him on the recruiting trail, this is just more fodder for them, right? Blaming it on the players. I mean, the guy had the Heisman Trophy winner in 2017, couldn't get it done. I mean, what else do you need? So, yeah, I don't know. I can't see how it's a positive really anyway, but I don't know. It's so strange. It's almost as strange. Nothing's going to be as strange as continuing to try and tell everyone that the deal came together on Sunday. But this is kind of goes right into that group was where this one falls.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know, but it was we had to talk about it because OU fans were not pleased. We're not pleased with some of the things he said in those interviews. All right, let's